Because I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't be easily traced back to the governor.
Now, why would you want to do that?
Other than the fact that he was my boss and I liked my job?
Well, could it have had something to do with the fact that you were about to instruct a sheriff to put up a poster asking that somebody be brought in dead or alive, an instruction which the governor had no legal authority to give? Could that have been it?
Objection, Your Honor. There's no evidence of what legal authority there was.
Is the suggestion that the governor is...
Court will overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, did you ever see a wanted poster put up by Sheriff Johnson? Yourself?
Yes.
And I want to direct your attention to Government's Exhibit 1. Does this appear to be a copy, or at least a fair and accurate representation of the wanted poster that you saw posted around Missouri following your sending the telegram to Sheriff Johnson?
It looks like it, yep.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to move the admission of Government's 1.
No objection, Your Honor.
One will be received in evidence.
Now, does this poster call for the apprehension, for the arrest or capture of Jesse or Frank James, dead or alive?
It says that, yeah.
Okay. And did you see posters like this more than once around the state of Missouri?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you ever bring the fact that you had seen such posters to the attention of the boss you loved so well?
Yes, I did.
What did you tell him?
I informed him that there was this award poster out and that it has his name on it.
Did you tell him that it called for the James boys to be taken dead or alive?
I did.
What did he say?
He said, that's not a problem.
All right, now let me direct your attention to April the 3rd of 1882. Where were you?
I was in the governor's mansion.
And where was the governor?
He was in St. Louis, I believe.
Did a telegram arrive for the governor on that occasion?
It did.
Who actually received that telegram?
I believe it was Sheriff Timberlake.
Okay. And who was in Jefferson City on that day? On April the 3rd? Sheriff Timberlake was there?
I believe so.
Yeah? Okay. Well, who opened this telegram?
I believe I did, sir.
Why would you open a telegram for the governor?
Because that was part of my responsibilities.
Who was it from?
It was from, I'm sorry, I don't have the recollection, and I don't remember straight off. Sure.
On April the 3rd of 1882, the day that Robert Ford shot Jesse James.
It came from Robert Ford.
Thank you.
There we go.
And what did this telegram from Robert Ford say to Governor Crittenden?
That he killed Jesse James.
What were the exact words? He said, did he not, I have killed Jesse James.
Yes.
Stop, St. Joseph. Stop, signed Bob Ford.
Yes.
So the assassin of Jesse James contacted the governor on the very day that he killed him.
It would appear that way.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Mr. Farr. Let's first talk a little bit about this wanted dead or alive poster.
Okay.
You talked with the governor about that, correct?
Correct, yes.
And he said that's not a problem, didn't he?
Correct.
You've been around politics for a while.
Yes, sir.
You're familiar with how the law enforcement system works in this state.
Well enough, I suppose.
You know, as do us all, that dead or alive reward posters are not unusual, are they?
Correct.
That dead or alive poster says a couple things, doesn't it? $5,000 additional for the arrest or capture of Mr. James. Is that right?
Correct.
Jesse or Frank James.
Correct.
Frank James wasn't killed, was he?
No.
The person who was to bring the man in or have to kill him in capturing him would receive a reward.
Correct.
Not unusual, is it?
No.
It's not illegal, is it?
No.
The governor met with supporters of his and obtained financing for that reward, didn't he?
Correct.
And he had to do that because the law, as we have it, only allowed for a $300 reward, didn't it?
Correct.
Now, you talked a little bit in your discussion with the Attorney General about some of the efforts to catch Mr. James' gang. And you mentioned that the governor worked with the sheriffs, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
The sheriffs are the chief law enforcement officers of each of their counties, aren't they?
Correct.
And sheriffs commonly nab bad guys, don't they?
That's the goal.
And before even the governor became the governor of this state, there had been many efforts to capture the James gang.
Correct.
They became famous because they were hard to capture.
Yep.
They became famous because they were killers.
Yep.
And it was
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation. This witness has no way of knowing that to be true.
Sustained.
difficult to capture them, wasn't it?
It would appear so.
And it took, in the governor's opinion, a substantial reward to do that.
Yes.
And he talked about that, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He talked about the possibility of Mr. James being, and the James problem being dealt with permanently, correct? The governor never said to you, the only option here is James' death, did he?
No.
And you never heard the governor have someone say that to him and him say, yes, you're right, did you?
No.
You never heard in his meetings with the railroad people him say to them, we're going to have Mr. James killed because that's the only permanent solution.
No.
And you very well know that under the law of this state, if Mr. James had been captured, there were other permanent solutions, weren't there?
Yes.
Life in prison,
Yes.
the death penalty,
Yep.
all would have permanently helped and solved this problem.
Correct.
Now, I want to talk to you a couple minutes about something, another piece of paper or document that came out a couple days after this reward.
Okay.
I'm going to show you, and I think you're familiar with this, Defendant's Exhibit 1.
Yes, sir.
That's a proclamation of the governor, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you were involved with issuing this proclamation as his secretary.
That I was.
And this proclamation talks about a couple train robberies that Mr. James and his gang were responsible for,
Yes.
3 deaths that they were responsible for,
Correct.
and it discusses the $5,000 reward,
Yes.
and it discusses specifically that that reward would be given for the capture of Jesse James and his gang.
Correct.
This proclamation doesn't say that dead is the only option.
No, it does not.
You know, sir, from the exploits of the James gang that was going to take someone brave or someone quite daring to try to capture Mr. James, correct?
Correct.
Would it be very effective to offer a reward if it didn't at least allow for the possibility of someone to defend themselves if a shootout with Mr. James was necessary?
Do I think it would be effective?
Yes, sir.
I would think that it would be highly less effective if it didn't contain such a thing.
And the governor didn't think so either, did he?
No.
And he had a solemn duty to help protect this state from Mr. James
Yep.
and his gang,
Yes.
who threatened the lives of people in this state
Yes.
and threatened.
Objection. Calls for speculation. This has no way to know that.
Any response?
Your Honor, I think the evidence has already come in that Mr. James was a killer, and I think it's...
Objection, Your Honor. There is no such evidence at all.
Sustained.